I hope that you take away not just at a personal level, but as a leader in your work environments, in your community, as a caretaker, perhaps even as a parent. How can you help facilitate the ending of a season, putting a nice bow around it, and helping people prepare emotionally, mentally, even perhaps physically for a new beginning and a new chapter? All I want for the holidays is closure and celebration. Isn't that all we really want is to find a way to wrap up the year in a way that feels good, that sets us up for starting the new in the energy that serves us? I think we do. And that's why I'm excited for this episode of the Unlock Lab. Welcome. You have entered episode number 43. And today I'm talking to you about how to wrap up a season with a bow. Now, the season might be the year, it might be a particular chapter you're in, it might be a season of a relationship, it could be a lot of different things. But of course, given that it's December, this is a time where a lot of us are trying to find some closure so that we can get ready for what's next and the new beginning and what's coming in 2025. I'm so glad you're here and I'm excited to jump into this topic. Before I do, if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Tosca DiMatteo, your host and the founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting. I do speaking engagements and one-on-one coaching at the intersection of personal growth and professional breakthroughs. I do deep transformation and not just surface mindset shifts. I help individuals and teams and bigger groups with discovering the ahas to create an unlock in their life. If you want to learn more about what I do, you can visit my website at coachtosca.com. That's Coach TOSCA.com. All right. So here we are, early December, and this is the time of year where a lot of folks are having year-end reviews. There's a lot of hustle and bustle and activity. And I think there's also a lot of honoring of endings. And that's probably super heightened right now because we had quite a year or more of activity, even right in the political arena. And so there's probably a lot of desire to say, okay, let's close this chapter and look forward to a new beginning. When we can do this for ourselves in every single kind of environment, it is really powerful. And when I say that, I mean not just in this kind of big chapter ending stuff. You know, maybe chapter ending is divorce for you. Maybe chapter ending is 2024. Maybe chapter ending is playing small in your life and you're ready for a new chapter. And this can be done at any moment, at any time. It can also be celebrating the end of a project with your team at work, right? It could be something that your family went through. It can be all kinds of things. And I think in general, we don't talk enough about closure, about finding a way to gracefully and gratefully end things in a way that helps us to feel complete, right? Actually, I was just speaking with a client recently about some friendships that she had that she never really felt closure on, even though she sent emails out to try to figure out what happened and never got anything in return. And you know what I said to her is there's definitely more opportunity for closure because clearly you still don't have it, even though you sent an email asking for stuff. And so part of the work that we do with my clients is finding out what will give us the closure that we need. And it's different for everybody and it's different in different situations. For example, friendships where maybe you weren't able to have a final conversation or you wanted to, but the other person wasn't willing. You can ask yourself, well, what do I need for closure? And it may take a few rounds. It may require some experimentation. So it might mean you need to write a letter saying all the things, throwing out all the F-bombs out there to get out your real emotions without having to worry about somebody actually reading the thing, but just so that you can release it from you. It might require having some conversations with some other folks that can hold space for you and your processing. That might be a therapist, that might be a coach, that might be a really trusted friend or a spouse. But there's all kinds of ways that we can close and that we can essentially let go of the things that we need to let go of to fully embrace our power, to step into our power, and to step into the new beginning that we so desire for ourselves and we so deserve, you know? So I have some ideas to support you in wrapping up this season, whatever season it is for you, with a bow. And I'm going to kind of give it to you in terms of considering that we're ending a year, and give you some tips that I use for myself, that I use with my clients in terms of really honoring in a beautiful way. And when I say honoring in a beautiful way, I say this because sometimes we can be really harsh with ourselves, and we can say, "Oh, I can't wait for this thing to be over. I can't wait for this year to be over." And you know what? I get that. And I personally think that moving into an energy of gratitude, of honoring what was good from it, is actually going to serve you more than holding on to the disgust or the disdain or the resentment of what was. Even when what we're closing and the chapter we're closing may feel like it was all bad. I believe that our experiences are for us. They happen for us and not to us. And if we look at life that way, if we look at this past year in that way, then I'm going to guess you're going to find a lot of learnings, a lot of lessons, and a lot of information that you can use in a constructive and productive way going forward. So, first and foremost in this, it's really important to remember what your priorities were for this season, and also realizing when those priorities may have shifted. Because what can happen is we get to the end of the year or the end of the chapter and we start beating ourselves up on what we didn't do and what we didn't accomplish. And we do that because we don't honor and realize, well, actually, we made choices about our priorities, whether or not we realize it or not. So we may have prioritized, for example, some family life stuff over our career. If we're looking at the total chapter that we're evaluating, we may have to realize, okay, these things didn't happen in my career or in my business. And that's probably due a large part because my focus was on my family and my caregiving or whatever else was happening in my life that I wanted to or that I had to put more emphasis and priority over. You can think about this on a month to month basis. You can think about it on a quarterly basis, or you can think about the whole year. I have a great example here. So this year, I was really focused in terms of my business on speaking and getting on stages and sharing the gospel and preaching, all the tools that I have for other people. And what this meant was that I was focused on creating keynotes. I was focused on all the activities where I had to deliver in front of these audiences. As a result, what got deprioritized was filling a pipeline of one-on-one clients, which of course I still take on. It's still a part of my business model, but I was focusing on speaking. And it could be easy for me to look at the end of the year and say, oh my gosh, I didn't have as many one-on-one clients as I would have liked. But I have to remind myself what I prioritized throughout the year. And that can prevent my inner critics from coming in and beating me up about what didn't happen. Because I can remember the truth of, oh, right, but my priority was speaking. My priority was killing the game every time I got in front of an audience. And then I can celebrate those wins. Just to recap, right? Remember your priorities and write them down. Have some fun with this. Get some construction paper, get some markers, whatever floats your boat, and remember your priorities. Honor if and how they shifted throughout the year. The second piece is to remember what came up that was unanticipated, that maybe disrupted things. And this kind of goes part and parcel to this idea of what were your priorities. So for example, the unanticipated might include somebody close to you passed away and you had to deal with some grief, or there was a major disruption in the family and you had to address it, or there was health issues, and on and on. These are all parts of life that we don't necessarily anticipate and plan for, but that disrupt the chapter that we're in or the year that we're in some kind of way. and force us to reprioritize or focus on different things. And this definitely includes things that may have rocked your world, right? Really big things, but it may have been really small things too that just add up over time. Sometimes I think we can be hard on ourselves because we're like, but nothing major happened this year. But if you had little things here and there and there, and they add up and they became these quote unquote distractions, but you also had to address them, then we must honor that, right? Maybe it was a financial situation, or maybe it was, oh, I had to find a new tax accountant, or, oh my gosh, I had this issue with technology that went on for quite some time and that really disrupted some things. So it's like death by a thousand cuts kinds of things. So consider even the small things and how they added up over time. I think about one of my best friends who has two kids, and she has to constantly address things that come up, whether it's somebody broke a foot or somebody hurt their finger or somebody had to go to the doctor or the dentist, or, all these things that come up that maybe they're not huge in isolation, but when you think about how frequent they are and how prevalent they are, that we have to honor, like, yep, that's part of my story. That's part of the narrative. That's part of the chapter that I want to honor with grace and gratitude. Those are the first two things, right? Remembering your priorities, remembering the unanticipated things, the big things, the small things that maybe took your focus. And these are things that we can be really proud of too, like handling the stress of life, handling the curveballs, and all the things. Obviously, right, in an election year, there may have been a lot of attention and focus and emotion that went towards that. And that's significant too. Okay, so the next piece is about honoring the lessons that you learned. So this might be in the category of the lessons you learned about relationships, the lessons you learned about yourself and who you want to be, perhaps who you don't want to be. It may be about the spaces that you're in. Maybe you learned some spaces aren't for you anymore. Maybe you learned about managing finances better. Maybe you learned a bit about how to take care of your body better because maybe there were some health challenges, right? These are all things that help us to close the chapter in a way that supports honoring how we grew, how we developed. And we often don't stop and think about, well, what did I learn? What patterns did I break this year for myself? For me, for example, and I may have talked about this in previous episodes, but most of my life, I was an overgiver. I can still fall into the tendencies of overgiving. But this year, I really embraced the mantra that access is a privilege. And that means I get to be even more discerning about where I give my time, energy, and attention. And I am really proud of the work that I did around this because it was hard and it was persistent. And I had to keep looking at situations and asking myself, am I overgiving or am I honoring that access is a privilege? These are the kinds of things I'm talking about in terms of what are the lessons you learned? What are the patterns that you broke? And what have you learned about yourself and about others and all those things? Next, and notice that this wasn't the first thing, you guys. Like, this is down the line of, okay, now let's honor the wins. Not just what you accomplished or what you got done, but also who you became along the way. And these lists, I want you to, man, I really would encourage you to get out a big old notepad, a nice journal, and really go through. And you can do this if you don't do this on a regular basis, if you don't have a practice already of doing this on a weekly basis or daily basis, I'm going to encourage you to do it all at once and honor your whole year. I've done this before where I have fallen out of practice with it and have done like a year at a time. And what I do when I do that is I go and look at each week on my calendar and I remind myself what that week was, who I spoke with, what did I do? And I start to list out my accomplishments. Ooh, I had a really difficult conversation with this person. Oh, I did that podcast interview. I totally forgot about it. Or, oh, wow, right. I had to find a new team member to support my business. And that was a journey. That was like a multi-month journey, right? So all of these things that we forget about, we could go back and say, let me honor my year. Let me, even if my inner critics are coming along and telling me that I didn't do anything and it was a crap year and I could have done so much more, When you go through and do this kind of exercise, it is a great antidote to the inner critic voices because you will see, I guarantee you will see you have done so much. You have so many wins to acknowledge and celebrate. Celebration is a big part of how we close a chapter. And I'm not going to go in a great detail on this because I did an episode on celebration last year. I think it was actually called What's Celebration Got to Do with It? And I want you to dive deep on celebration, but I'm not going to do it right here. But just know that closing a chapter with a team, with your year, with yourself, always should include celebration because that is how we honor ourselves and others around us. Okay, the next piece really builds off of the episode from last week around thanks and giving as a way of life. One way that we can close our chapter is to be in gratitude for what you have, for what is, for what you appreciate. And again, you can create really laundry lists here and acknowledge what you have because we so often focus on the lack. Our inner critics have us focused on the scarcity and what we don't have. And being in gratitude reminds you, right, there's all this good stuff in my life. And there's all this good stuff that I don't want to take for granted. And by acknowledging it, by writing it out, by saying it out loud, it will support you and not taking those things for granted because we can very easily do that, especially when we get caught up in comparison. And that can happen at the end of the year. Oh, so and so got a promotion. I didn't get a promotion, right? Oh, so and so had a whole full calendar of speaking gigs. I did not, right? We can do that to ourselves. One of the ways we get out of that is by being in gratitude for what is, what we do have, and what we appreciate. Gosh, I just love this topic so much. Right. So we're all about closing the circle. And some of this can be done on your own. Some of this can be done with others. You might want to consider having this closeout experience with a friend of yours or with your spouse, or you may want to do it with a few people to wrap up the season. And this is different than you're going to the happy hour and you're cheersing with your glass of wine. And you're like, cheers to 2024, welcoming 2025. This is deeper than that. This is a deeper honoring of the season so that you can close it properly, which I think you've probably gotten that if you've listened this far into the episode. Okay, now I'm going to offer you some questions that you can journal on or talk about with others as well in terms of closing out the year. The first one is, what will you leave behind? That might be people, that might be behaviors, that might be the things that you're not going to do anymore. It could be a host of things. What will you leave behind? And that could be part of the what was yucky about it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to leave behind, the political discourse and my discontentment with that, whatever that is. The next question to consider is, what will you take with you? What was the good stuff that you want to carry with you? Maybe you really started to focus on your self-care and your mental health. And maybe you want to carry that with you. Maybe you found the perfect therapist and you want to carry that work with you next year. Maybe what you want to take with you is some habits that you've built. Maybe you've built some journaling habits for yourself, or maybe you've built in a gratitude practice and you want to take that with you. Maybe you want to take with you your ambition and your passion, right? The list can go on and on. So there's just some ideas. The next question is, what longings do you have? And this is about honoring, what do you still want? Maybe you weren't able to get it all done in 2024, but just honoring, you know what? Yeah, I still have a longing for more international travel. For example, for me, there's a lot of staycations that happen, mostly due to like having a puppy and, wanting to like be in her energy. But also, I still have a longing to do more international travel. How can I find more balance with that? That's maybe one of the things I would put on my list. A longing can also be a healing that you're looking for. Like maybe you're longing to heal that mother wound or that father wound, or you're looking to heal that relationship with your ex and find closure with it for yourself, or the list goes on. The longings can be the things that you want. It can be the things that you want to heal from. You can look at this from a number of different angles, and there's no wrong angle. And the other piece, because we're early on in December, if you're listening to this now, is what do you need as the holiday season continues? And if you're listening to this and it's not the holiday, then perhaps it's what do you need as this chapter comes to a close? And asking ourselves, what do we need helps us with the closure. You may say, man, you know what I really need as I'm closing out this chapter is some one on one time with my closest friends. Or maybe it's, I really need some alone time with myself to just digest and integrate the year and what I've learned and what I've done. Maybe what you need is some grounding because you feel like all over the place because it's just been a crazy chapter and things are busy and crazy. And so maybe what you want is and need is some grounding and some walking to just let it all settle. So these are just some ideas, right? Like, what do I need as this chapter is coming to a close? I don't know. I just really think this is a really important topic. I hope that you take away, not just at a personal level, but as a leader in your work environments, in your community, as a caretaker, perhaps even as a parent. How can you help facilitate the ending of a season, putting a nice bow around it, and helping people prepare emotionally, mentally, even perhaps physically for a new beginning and a new chapter? If you have any questions about this for yourself or for your teams, feel free to reach out. My contact information is in the show notes as always. And I'm wishing you a beautiful closing season here in this month. And know that just because the year ends on December 31st doesn't mean your closure has to end exactly on that calendar date, right? That we can give ourselves permission to take the time that we need to find the closure on the divine timing that we need it. I'm a really big fan of not putting pressure on things. You can have a goal for yourself for sure. You can say, yeah, I really want to feel the closure by then so that January 1, I'm stepping in. It may not happen that way, right? No need to pressure it. No need to force it. But if you're thinking about it already, if this is resonating for you, then I hope you take some time to close out in a way that honors how powerful you are, how strong you are, how beautiful you are, how much you have been able to accomplish this year, how much love you have given to others, how much service you have been to others, and all the things. Because I know that you've got some great things to take away from this year and that others have benefited from how you've shown up this year and that you've learned some lessons that are going to make life a lot easier for you next year. I'm cheering you on. I'm excited for this ending and your new beginning. If you're so inclined, if you enjoyed this episode or this podcast at all, I would invite you to rate, review, and like on the platform that you're listening on. Leave a comment or leave a review. That would be amazing. I'd love to hear from you. And I love to have more people have access to this content. So as always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for prioritizing you and making the time to listen. And I'm excited to talk to you next week as the final episode of the year. Hard to believe, but I look forward to seeing you there. And thanks for tuning in. Ciao for now.